Hello, hello, and welcome back, or welcome to the Yogi Roth Show, where we talk to people who are seeking and uncovering humanity in sports all around the globe. And today's guest does exactly that, and in fact, he's been doing it for quite some time. His name? Mack Brown. Yep, it's the Coach Mack Brown, the national championship head coach, the Hall of Fame inductee coach, and now the current ESPN analyst who coaches millions every weekend on ESPN, talking about the greatest game on earth. And I've really looked forward to this conversation for quite some time. You know, I go all the way back to my early 20s when I moved to Los Angeles, and my first season on the USC coaching staff, of course, we finished undefeated and play an undefeated Texas Longhorns team in what has gone down as the greatest game in the history of college football, which Coach Brown was obviously the head coach on. And ever since that night, I followed him and his career closer than you probably would other coaches in the profession. And everywhere I've turned, literally every person I've ever talked to, they talk about the incredible philosophy Coach Brown has, how he's a rock, how he's kind to everybody, how he always remembers your name, how he just really believes in the way you do small things, the way you do all things. And so I've really looked forward to this conversation and trying to learn some things about somebody who's been on huge stages of high performance, who's fallen and gotten back up, and somebody who's really had a vision and a philosophy and an ideology that was clear at an early age, but also developed and nuanced throughout his career. So I think you're really going to enjoy our discussion. I'm going to make sure that I get out of the way. I do not want this to be a long open, but make sure you go to yogiroth.com and subscribe to the How Great Is Ball newsletter. That's right, How Great Is Ball. And each week, I'm going to try to give you 3 unique insights in your inbox. You can read them quick, you can read them on the go, and hopefully enjoy something along the way around the greatest game that I believe is on earth, which is college football, and of course, the power that sports have. So enjoy this conversation. If you want new things, get rid of some old things, let me know. Hit me up on social media at Yogi Roth. But in the meantime, sit back and listen to one of the greats of all time, Coach Mack Brown. All right, Coach, thanks for joining the podcast. Been thinking about having you on for years, so very much appreciative for you taking your time. And I want to ask you a quick question to start off, because I have this incredible memory of the first time that we met. And I want to take you all the way back to when you were about to play Bama in the Rose Bowl. Do you remember meeting Pete Carroll the day before the game on the field?
I do.
What do you remember about that?
You know, I remember I've always admired Pete, number one. His energy, his attitude. He's such a competitor. And he, all that energy and competitive spirit exudes to his teams, and they play with that energy, and so every time I'm around him, he's a guy I really look up to.
Yeah, it was really fun for me. I don't know if you remember when you guys met. There was this 25, 26-year-old guy kind of standing beside him, and that was me. And I remember kind of eavesdropping on your conversation, and you guys talked about relaxing as coaches and enjoying the game. And not so as far as relaxing late in games or in moments, but just having a lot of fun. And I want to start there with you. When did you, in your journey, know that you wanted to coach, knowing that, pretty much everybody in your family had been a coach? And when did you start, or had you always had and maximized the fun in the profession?
Yogi, I wanted to coach since I was about 13. My granddad was superintendent of schools in Cookeville, Tennessee, after being the winningest football high school coach in Middle Tennessee history. And the stadium's named after him. And when he became superintendent, he ran all the recreation programs in the summer. So I was the guy that fixed all the Little League and Babe Ruth League fields up and mowed the grass and lined the fields. And then I coached a Babe Ruth or a Little League team when I was in Babe Ruth at about 13. And that's when I really knew I wanted to coach. My older brother Watson obviously coached. My dad was a coach and a principal, and so they were all in the education business. And when I was a junior, I think, in high school, my grandmother came to me on my granddad's superintendent granddad's side and said, you need to get out of this coaching business. And you need to get out of this education business. You need to go be a lawyer or a doctor, because there's only a few Mickey Mantles and Roger Marises, but there are a lot of doctors and lawyers, and that's what you need to do. And she walked out of the room, and my granddad came in and said, boy, stay in this coaching. You'll have fun with it. You'll like it, and you won't make it in anything unless you're having fun. Well, that stuck in my brain, and then as an assistant coach, you can be freewheeling, calling plays, and enjoying it, having fun. And then all of a sudden you become a head coach at Appalachian State, and you're really not sure how hard the job is because you've never been there, and you're killing yourself. And at that time, I was making $38,500 a year, a little bit more than I made at LSU when I was calling the plays down there. And then Barry Switzer called me and offered me $125,000 to go to Oklahoma. And I was having a good time. I didn't want to leave. And you didn't want to be about money, but it was hard to turn down a chance to go to Oklahoma, be offensive coordinator, and make a lot more money, obviously. But I wanted to see what Oklahoma was about, and I wanted to see why they were winning. And I wanted to study guys like Coach Switzer and Coach Osborne, and wanting to learn about being a head coach. And then you leave there and become the head coach at Tulane, and you look up, they drop basketball, you're in your early 30s, they make you the athletics director. You've got 51 guys on scholarship and 41 of them on academic probation, and you're looking around saying, what did I do? This is crazy. And so it's no fun at that time. But you win enough. You go to a bowl game with Washington in your third year. You go to North Carolina, and then you're 2-20 because you've taken over a program that's just bottomed out. And none of that was fun at the time. As I look back, Yogi, those were great times because they molded me more as a person, and they molded me a lot more as a coach. Because when I had to deal with all of that adversity, it made staying at North Carolina a little bit easier after that, and then it made going to Texas something that I could handle because there hadn't been much that I hadn't seen.
Wow. All right, lot to unpack there. I want to start back to when you were 13. Why do you think people try to talk people out of coaching a lot? I hear the adage, I heard it when I was a young coach, of only do it if you have to. You don't want to stay in this profession. Curious your take on that, and maybe what you would tell young coaches as you continue to evolve in your career.
Well, I think your family would say that because it takes so much of your time away from your family. And there's no security, and you have to travel. I'm lucky that I'm married to a lady named Sally who said, you know what? Every profession that works hard isn't home a lot. That's just the way it is. And what she did is she decided that if she was going to see me, she was going to come and see me at lunch. She would come and see it, watch us practice, and be around then because that's what I was going to do. I play golf a little bit in the off season. She's not even a golfer. She went to Cal and she's an architect. She decided she'd start playing golf because that way she can see me something. And but I think that's probably part of it. You spend so much time with other people's kids. It's so up and down. It's so public. You have so little control of your destiny, and you move a lot. So I think that's it. I even asked Steve Sloan, who I played for when he was the head coach at Vanderbilt, could I be a GA? And he said, yeah, but make sure that if you're going to go into coaching, it's because you love the kids and you have such a passion for them in the game. Because if not, you'll never make it. And that really stuck in my mind as I was getting into this. But I really feel like that I coached for 42 years, 30 as a head coach. I played before that. I started playing in the fourth grade. So football has had such an impact on my life and my family's life that I've been very blessed.
You know, football, it impacts all of us in so many special ways. I think it teaches us so many different lessons and principles and disciplines. But there's also a dark side to the game. You know, I got hit and broke my neck playing. I read about a vicious hit that ended your career. You know, when that happened, was there a moment of hesitation for you of, man, do I really want to be around this? Or was it, okay, cool, I guess I can't play anymore. I'm just going to go ahead and coach like I wanted to when I was in the fourth grade?
Yogi, I think like you, at that time, I was disappointed I couldn't play and compete, but I still wanted to be part of the team. I wanted to be part of the football family. I wanted to be part of the game. So that's why I went immediately into coaching as a student assistant at Florida State. And I never never thought about quitting. I think now I've got 6 grandkids that are 7 and under. I've had 6 knee operations and a knee replacement, and my back hurts. It's hard to play golf, and it's hard to run and jog and do the things that you would like to do with your grandkids. So some of that, sometimes I sit there and say, was it worth it for me? And then when I think about, other than my faith in my family, football's been the most important thing in my life, I would definitely do it again.
Yeah, no, me too. I couldn't agree more. I get a lot of conversations, I'm sure you do, around the future of the game, and, here you are as a coach at App State making $38,000 and some change. And, now scholarship checks, call it, might be $30,000+ a year as well. I'm curious for you, how do you see the state of the game right now with everything around health, wellness, money, the dark side that can be drawn up a lot of times around a craft that both of us have built careers around?
Yeah, well, let's start with health, because that's the most important thing. I've got a 7-year-old grandson, and his parents asked me, would you let him play? And that's a very interesting question for you and I, because we did have devastating injuries when we got into the game. And what I told them was, I don't think you can keep people from doing something they're passionate about. That's not healthy. But make sure that you check out all of the modern day reports on health and the head injuries and shoulder injuries and knee injuries and back injuries and neck injuries like that. So absolutely educate yourself on what's out there. Secondly, make sure that he's playing for a coach that you trust, that goes through proper drills and takes care of the kids. You can teach without beating them up or trying to hurt them and discourage them at such a young age. And then if you feel comfortable and he feels comfortable, then you can move forward. And that's how I really believe. But don't just throw them out there and say everything's okay, let it go, because there's some coaches that I wouldn't want my kid to play for, and that's peewee coaches and high school coaches and college coaches. And I would make sure that it was someone I trusted. And you've mentioned 2 or 3 times the things that you learn. Well, you don't learn all of those from every coach. Mm. So make sure it's a coach that you believe in and that you would trust your son with. I always told our coaches, you need to coach the player like you would want your son or daughter to be coached. And when I would have a coach that grab a kid's arm or say something that was demeaning to him, I would simply pull him away from the players and say, would you say that to your son? Mm. And he'd say no. And I said, then don't do it. That's our deal. Like it or not, that's our deal. And I've always thought you can coach by being positive. Pete Carroll's disciplined. He's tough on people, but nobody knows that because he's got the smile. He's bouncing on the fields, and I got a lot of criticism for being too nice. But behind the scenes, we were very hard on the players, and we were very disciplined. We weren't demeaning, and we didn't feel like it was right to call out college players publicly. So from a health standpoint, I think we're really looking at doing all the right things. I see now the soft pads on the helmets at practice. What a great idea. Mm-hmm. It's brand new, and I've asked coaches as I travel, is it making a difference? And they said, absolutely. I said, how heavy is it? And they said, it's a little heavier, but for concussions, it's a great preventative measure. So that's smart. The rules are changing to a point that defensive coaches are griping a lot, and fans are griping a lot, but it's saving a lot of injuries. And it's not, we're not seeing as many vicious hits as we used to see, because we used to applaud them. Yeah. And now they're getting kicked out of the game for them. And we see it every week, whether we like it or not. If it saves an injury to a head, to a neck, then we're doing the right things. And all the research that's coming out, I think it's all helpful. And we're talking about what to do with kickoffs to make them safer, and even rules the last couple of years have helped do that. We're talking about punts. So let's look at what parts of practice are damaging to kids. Let's look at what parts of the game, and let's change it. and make sure we go forward. As far as the game itself, I'm a little worried, Yogi, that college is getting to be the NFL model. It's win at all costs. We're paying coaches huge salaries. I was one of those that started it. We're paying assistant coaches huge, $2 million, $1.8 million, 3-year contracts. And now assistant coaches are making more than presidents of universities. Head coaches are in some cases one of the higher paid people in the state. And I understand that. We brought in $165 million my last year at Texas. So the percentage of what you bring in for your salary, that kind of justifies it. But in the long run, I don't want to see us get to a point where it's all about money. It's all about firing the coach after the first game or something. I was asked last week after Notre Dame, should Jim Harbaugh be fired? Who better coach than Jim Harbaugh at Michigan? Mm-hmm. So let's look at fits, and let's look at Coach Schembechler, who he would pick, and Lloyd Carr, and those guys that have put so much time and energy into that program. Nobody fits better than Jim Harbaugh. So if he wins 9 now, there'll be a point where he'll win 12 or 13. But leave him there. Let's just quit jerking coaches out of there after 2 games and saying they can't coach. So I'm a little concerned about that part of it, because we have definitely taken an NFL model when we're looking at money, when we're looking at the cost, and when we're looking at paying our coaches and paying them off. And then lastly, I'm worried about attendance. A lot of students have quit going to games. And part of it's because there's so many great games on TV, and it's cost so much to go to the games. It's easier for people to sit at home and just watch there. You and I used to have police escorts, and we were on a bus. There's a whole lot of get in that stadium 2 hours early and coach, and then get out of there. People have to sit in those lines for long hours, and it's cost them a lot of money. So I think that's something else that we have to address moving forward, is making sure that we're fan friendly, and that we're making the experience of the day such that a fan will still want to come, because you're supposed to be at that event and you want to be there regardless of who you're playing.
Right. I know as a head coach, you're just in it. I can remember the year, it was my first year coaching, and you guys won that epic, historic Rose Bowl national championship game. And I can remember being with Pete every night. We're going for our third. He's going for his third. It's my first year doing it. I'm sleeping in the office every night, and he's sleeping in the office a lot. And it's just a grind. And I ask you that and bring that story up because I wonder when coaches get a break, right? When you get to pause for a minute, whether that's, 10 minutes, like right before you go to bed, or taking a shower, or maybe you have to wait until the end of the season. What's it like when expectations, as well as criticism and even celebration around you, is at ridiculous highs or ridiculous lows? I'm curious, for a guy who's lived everything from 2-20, as you referenced, to a national title, to highest paid coach at one time in college football. What's it like when everything is just coming at you when you take a break? Like, does it all come rushing in, and do you feel it all, or do you really try to block it out and you just keep moving on?
Yogi, it's a great question, and my advice to young coaches has been, make sure you enjoy the moment, enjoy the journey. They can't. I couldn't. Pete couldn't. Right after we won the Rose Bowl game, we won the national championship. I'm up all night talking to boosters who at Texas hadn't won a national championship in 35 years, and they're wondering if they'd ever see one again in their lives. And then the president's calling at 6 a.m, and the next day I'm sitting there talking to Ben Chung about whether he's coming back or not, and we've got a great team coming back. Everybody's coming back if Vince comes back. It's not my place to tell him to come back. They're going to pay him $20 million. He needed to go. But then I got a redshirt freshman quarterback that hadn't played a snap named Colt McCoy, and I got a mad Ohio State team coming to Austin the next year in the second ball game of the year. So I don't think there is a chance to ever sit down. Sally, when we went to the White House to celebrate the national championship, I'm with the president and the first lady, and I see Sally in the front row, and she's crying. And I sent somebody to say, "Are you okay?" And she said, "Yeah, this is the first time I really realized the impact of winning a national championship." That was Valentine's Day. after we had left the Rose Bowl. And I said, why did it hit you there? And she said, everybody wants to have their players walking down the steps of the White House because that means you were the best team in the country. And she said, it just didn't hit me what a wonderful experience it is for these guys until that point. So your point is taken. Coaches enjoy the journey. No, you get a win, go back and win the next one. And we were 25-2, Yogi, when we lost to Alabama in the national championship in 2009. And I was so disappointed that we lost that game that I didn't give those kids credit for being 25-2. It's something that I'll regret the rest of my life. I thought we had let the state of Texas down. We had let the University of Texas down because it's so hard to get to a national championship. And then Colt got hurt after the fifth play, and that bothered me. And then did we prepare the freshman quarterback, Garrett Gilbert, enough? And should he have played more? Well, we were trying to get Colt in a position to win the Heisman. And there's so many things that you look at every day as a coach. You just don't sleep very well.
Yeah, well, think back to 1982 if you can. I love asking coaches this question of when you interviewed for your head coaching job at App State, was that your first head coaching interview? And curious how you prepared for that opportunity.
Because I love my granddad so much, and he was such a great coach, and granddad was one that said, I'll never forget this. Remember everybody's name because their name's important to them. Coach Royal told me many years ago, don't ever walk by anybody that wants your autograph or your picture, regardless of how young or how old, because it's not about you, it's about the position, and you owe the position that if you're going to be the head coach. And my granddad always smiled and made everybody feel comfortable. So those were things that I knew, but from a very young age, I told my granddad I wanted to be a successful college football coach. That's what I wanted to do. And I went to college to do that. I went to Vanderbilt, studied law early, and I thought, I don't like to read. And that's bad. You're supposed to like to read, but I don't. And lawyers have to read. So this is wrong. This is stupid. Do what you want to do. So I think the biggest thing is that I watched every successful coach, and I studied every successful coach. And I got every autobiography of every successful coach and a lot of successful CEOs. But in coaching, I wanted to see what everybody did and how they did it. And what I learned is that you had to take a lot of the good things everybody did, but do it with your personality. And you can't be somebody else. So I actually flew up and interviewed at East Tennessee State. And then the athletics director, Jim Garner, who's passed away since then, that hired me at Appalachian State, picked me up in the car at East Tennessee State, which is about an hour and a half away, and drove me over the mountain to Boone, North Carolina. I'd never been there. But coming from Middle Tennessee, I love the mountains, I love the lakes. And then I decided to take the job at Appalachian State. And we were actually at LSU playing Nebraska in the Orange Bowl. So I stayed for that game and then left right after.
Wow. That's classic. Coach, my first catch in my career was against East Tennessee State, by the way, which is pretty funny. When you continue on in your career, what you did at North Carolina, I can remember kind of growing up in that era when you guys were peaking in 97. I think I was like a sophomore in high school. I remember watching the games, and you just had some really gifted players clearly on that team. What was that like for you to leave? Because it felt like you had built something so beautiful, and we're in an era now, and maybe it was like that back in the day, where I feel like now people will leave because there's just certain, like there's top 10 jobs, right? SC, Texas, Bama, Ohio State. But I wonder, did you have a bunch of opportunities to leave? Because you were having a lot of success there and clearly turned that thing around. And if so, why did you stick around? And then what made you eventually leave?
Yogi, we had opportunities to leave every year, and lots of them. And we nearly went to Oklahoma when they hired Howard Snellenberger. But we got down to the end of that. But my brother was there. He was an offensive coordinator for Gary Gibbs, and he thought he had a chance to get the job. So I wasn't going to take it. So I went home. Sally had a great development job. In fact, she was making about $1 million a year, and I was making $275, and about the lowest paid coach in the league. But she'd been there 17 years, and we didn't want to leave. And then John Swafford became commissioner of the ACC. They hired a different athletics director, and it wasn't as smooth for us. But Sally and I did a smart thing about 4 or 5 years before we left. All these jobs were coming open every year, and people were calling us, and we'd always say, let's look at it. And we just wasted our time and theirs. So we sat down and said, let's get 2 or 3 places in America that if they called us, we would be serious about it, and we're not going to talk to anybody else. So we actually put down Texas because Coach Royal had come down and helped me at Tulane, and I loved him, and he was kind of a role model for me. We put down Georgia because I thought it was a really good job because there's so many players in the state of Georgia. And we put down Florida State because that's where I finished school and graduated and coached down there. And Florida State was a place that I knew was good, and I would have loved to have been part of that program. So when people would call for those 4 or 5 years, we'd say, no, sorry, thank you. That's not something we're interested in. And people would say, what? Why? I said, it's just not. It's not what we want to do. So when Texas called, they were very, very interested in some other people. And they said, will you come to Austin to interview? And we said, no. They said, we're going to the Atlantic Coast Conference banquet in Atlanta. In 2 days, we'll be down there. If you want to come there and talk to us, that's fine. But I'm not going to disrespect North Carolina. We're not leaving. We love it here. But if you want to talk to us, we'll talk about it. And then we interviewed in Atlanta. Spent most of the day. They had a 14-member committee fly down there to interview us, which we didn't know was coming. We thought it was 2 people. And then they tried to get us to go to Austin at that time and immediately and take the job. And we said, no, we've got children in Chapel Hill. We've got a team in Chapel Hill. We owe people in Chapel Hill. And we went back and we sat down and talked to all of our bosses in Chapel Hill and went over everything. And we just felt like that at that time, that after those conversations, it was best for us to leave. And we actually, that afternoon, the next day after we got back, we got on a plane, flew to Texas, met the team. We had actually had a press conference in Chapel Hill right after I met the team in Chapel Hill, which is one of the worst days of my life when I had to tell those guys that were really good that we were leaving. And then go to a press conference right after that. I still had the North Carolina sweater on that I wore for the press conference when I pulled into Texas and met the Texas team that night. So you can imagine we interviewed in Atlanta. We get back late after at night. There's media everywhere because it's leaked out that we're talking to Texas. They won't leave us alone. Then we got players calling. We've got our children over crying. What are you doing? Are you leaving? Are you staying? So we didn't sleep any. And then about 1:30 the next day, we met with the athletics director at North Carolina. And like I said, that was the message for us that it was time for us to go. So then we had a 3:00 meeting to prepare for the bowl. We met with the team at 3. I think about 3:30 we met with the media in North Carolina. We got on a plane. We headed to Texas. We met with that team at probably 8:30 at night with my North Carolina sweater on. And then they had a large group of people for us to eat dinner with. So we got in bed about midnight. And then the next day we had a luncheon with top boosters and then a press conference. And when I walked into that press conference at Texas, and it was in the basketball arena, and there were about 5,000 people there, and it was on statewide TV and statewide radio. Sally looked at me and said, well, get ready, boy. This is different.
Yeah, I can only imagine that. Following up on that, one of my favorite phrases is the concept of form versus essence. And I talked to the top players of the Pac-12 and the 11 quarterbacks around this concept a lot. I'm curious for you, when you took that job, the form of it is what you just referenced, right? Crazy job, 5,000 people at the opening press conference, crazy expectations, and you're the guy, you're the dude in Texas football, leading one of the most historic programs in the history of the game. But I'm curious what the essence of that job is, and how did you figure that out? How did you maneuver it around the bigness of just the actual title and the office that you now sat in?
Well, we turned the pressure that you should feel there into pride, because the Texas football fan base has tremendous pride in their program. So I tried to be like them. And Coach Royal told us a number of things. I said, Coach, what do you have to do to be a successful head football coach at Texas? Because they've been up and down so much through their history, and you wouldn't think Texas would be up and down. You'd think they'd be good all the time. And he said, you either need to like the state or act like you like it, because they like it a lot. So he said, you got to become a Texan. Be dipped and vaccinated, he said. He said, secondly, you got to reach out to all the different groups that you've got there. It's a very diverse group. You got billionaires, you got millionaires, you got grassroots people, you got faculty in a very highly ranked academic environment. You've got 27 million people. You got high school coaches, maybe 1,300 high schools in the state of Texas. When I got there, and there were 322 in North Carolina. You got media, you got Dallas, you got Houston, you got San Antonio and Austin, some of the bigger cities in the country, and then you've got national media. He said, everything you say is going to be scrutinized so much. And I said, so why should I come? What's the best thing about the job? And he said, best thing about the job is 27 million people care every day about what happens with you in Texas football. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, that's cool. What's bad about the job? He said, 27 million people care every day about what you do, and they scrutinize it. And he said, that's just the life you live. So what the reason we went, other than Coach Royal, is we thought we could win the national championship with bright kids and go by the rules, because there were so many players in Texas that we had a chance to choose from. And we knew the high school coaches would be the difference in helping the state university. And I really wanted to win a national championship. That was very important to me at that time. And as close as we got at North Carolina, I was so disappointed. Our last team was 11-1, and we ended up in the Gator Bowl, not in the BCS where I thought we deserved to be. And that was disappointing to me as well. And that's another reason that we left. We felt like that North Carolina wasn't getting the credit that they deserved and the recognition, and it was going to be hard to ever get over that hump to win it all.
I love that. Coach, I want to talk about the Rose Bowl now. And I can remember the one prior to when, Texas and SC played, and it was so electric. And part of me in my mind's eye said, God, I think we're going to play Vince Young in Texas the next season. But there's always a lot of talk around that Rose Bowl. If you could take us inside the coaching profession a little bit. I think a lot of people think that coaches can either manipulate or talk their way into other games. There's a lot that goes on in college football versus just one voice of whether it's Nick Saban or it was Mack Brown or Pete Carroll. That Rose Bowl, there was so much talk around you guys, and specifically on the West Coast Cal. What goes on? Like, do you have any say in that? Like, you trying to work it at all? I mean, we've seen guys have press conferences and talk about their teams, but that seems like it's just commonplace. But I'm curious if you went back and reflected on that. Give us any insight into that moment in that year.
Well, yeah, just to touch on it, Jeff had a great team at Cal. Mm-hmm. And it was a team that was rolling, and they were scoring a lot of points, and we had a great team. And, I mean, the polls were going to decide who went to the Rose Bowl. And Texas had never been to the Rose Bowl. It's pretty hard to do something at Texas that's never been done, so that was kind of cool. Texas had never played Michigan. I loved Lloyd Carr, due to this day. And I thought it would be so cool for a Texas-Michigan Rose Bowl. That didn't mean that I didn't feel like that Cal should go to the Rose Bowl. It wasn't my choice. I got a lot of criticism at that time, Yogi, because I took up for our team. And I stood up for them strong, and people jumped all over it. That was my job. I like my team. I mean, I couldn't believe that anybody would say that the head coach, what's he doing? He's bragging on his team. He's trying to get them in the Rose Bowl. Well, yeah. Look out. I thought, yeah, thank you. You think the players at Texas would have respected me if I had not come out so strong and said, no, we've earned this right. We'll do everything to get in there. Jeff Tedford did the same, I'm sure, at Cal. Aaron Rodgers won't speak to me to this day because he's still mad that they didn't get to go to the Rose Bowl. But I felt like that some people called it politics. I thought it was my job. I thought it was smart. I thought bring attention to our team because it's really, really good. And I do know that by going to the Rose Bowl and staying in the same hotel we did the next year, practicing at the same place we did the next year, being around the Rose Bowl people in that environment and beating Michigan late absolutely helped us next year against Southern Cal because we kept telling our guys that was a practice for next year. That was just preparation. Yeah. And now you've got to make sure we win all the games and get to the point where we have the right to play SC. But you're right. And I'm in the media now, and I spend every day in the fall talking about college football. And I would take up for any coach that stands up for his team. I was baffled by the fact that somebody said, Brown's coming out strong with the team. The team loved it and they appreciated it. And if I had to do over, I would do exactly the same thing, whether we got in or not. I love Jeff Tedford. I've talked to him a lot about it. We played in the Holiday Bowl a number of years later, I think 2010. And he and I laughed about it. And Jeff is a great guy who understood what I did. And there is some power in the Texas brand name. And that did help us publicly. But was it wrong? No, not at all.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that wholeheartedly. When you come back the next year, two-part question. Prior to the game, did you, at this point in your career, I mean, granted, again, another first for Texas, right? Are they going to get a title? I guess not a first, but in I think it was 30 years or so. Did you take a minute in pregame and look up in the crowd? I know I did, and here I was 22, 23, and I thought I was going to be John Wood. And I was like, man, every year is going to be like this. This is awesome. And I looked up into the crowd and saw literally two states just represent each other. And I'm wondering if you gave yourself a moment of pause prior to the game just to say, wow, this is pretty cool back here, second year in a row, and now for the Natty.
Well, Yogi, it's a great question. And I was 54 at that time, 45 when I got to Texas, and 54 when we were standing in the middle of the field at the Rose Bowl. And I loved Coach McKay in USC. I loved John Robinson in USC. When I was a senior in high school, OJ was the thing, and everybody wanted to run the ball like SC. And so I actually picked up the phone because we had coached against Coach Robinson when I was at North Carolina, and he had gone back to USC. And I said, Coach, what? And for most people know, but for those who didn't, he was the head coach twice at USC and coached the Rams and one of the best ever. And I said, Coach, tell me what I'm supposed to know about coaching in the Rose Bowl. And he was so good. He said, Coach, not many people ever get to play or coach in the Rose Bowl. So it's really, really cool. And he said, it's hard to get there. He said, secondly, when you walk out on that field in pregame and see the sun going down and look over those beautiful mountains, he said, look up and say, this is pretty cool. I like this. And then he said, coach the hell out of your team like you always do. And that's kind of what I did. I stood there in pregame, and first I love SC football. I think it's really cool. And I looked up and I saw the white horse and the Trojan on it. And I thought, that's cool. Leanne Rhymes was singing the national anthem. I'm a country music fan, so I love Leanne Rhymes. And I thought that was cool. And she came over and said, Coach, I'm really from Texas. So, I'm pulling for us. I said, great, Leanne. I love it. That's good. I stood out and talked to Pete before the game. And like we said earlier, I've got great respect for Pete. So, and what he'd done. And the fact that he'd won 2 national championships. We had a dinner a couple of nights before the game with coaches, their coaches and our coaches, and position coaches sat together. I actually had Coach Royal sit next to Pete because I wanted to talk to him. Coach Royal won 3 national championships, and everybody thought Pete was about to. So I thought, what the heck? Let him sit there and talk about it. It's hard to do. It was fun with Pete and Coach Royal sitting at dinner. And then Our offensive coordinator, Greg Davis, came over and he said, "What are you thinking, Coach?" And pregame after Pete had walked off. And I said, I believe, Greg, they've got a great-looking team. And to his credit, he said, "Well, turn around, Coach, and look at yours. You got a great-looking team, too. We're going to be okay." And that's kind of the stuff that happens in pregame, Yogi, that you and I are privileged to, that a lot of people never get to experience. And just certain moments like that in your life are moments that you never forget.
Yeah, wow, that's special. I can remember meeting Darryl Royal at that dinner. My eyes were wide open. It was the first time I experienced, hanging out with another staff. I think as a young coach, you're like, you're not supposed to talk to them. You're not supposed to be friends with them. And that year I was dropped right into craziness, which was back-to-back titles, being a part of that. On that note, Coach, in that game, I remember it like yesterday. I'm in the booth. I'm sitting next to Lane Kiffin and Rocky Seto on the final 4th and 5, 23 seconds left in the ball game. What play was called, and what was supposed to happen on that play prior to Vince Young having one of the most miraculous runs in the history of the game?
Well, we were obviously in 1 minute mode because you guys were up by 12 with 6:42 left. It's not like we were planning pregame or postgame speeches because it did not look good. But we knew that Vince was so good in the fourth quarter, and he never got tired. And defenses got tired of trying to chase him and tackle him, and so we had a chance if we could just stop. And the 4th and 1 stop where Pete got so much criticism about not having Reggie Bush on the field. My gosh, Lindell White had gained 150 yards or something. We hadn't stopped him all night on that play. So, and even on that play, Yogi, I remember Gene Chiswick saying, "Coach, what do you think?" And I said, "Bring them all." Put them all up on the line of scrimmage. And he said, "Coach, what if they throw it?" I said, "We'll congratulate them on a great win. But we cannot let them hand it to Lindell White because that's what I would do if I was them." And then, of course, we stopped you guys by 6 inches or something. But on the last call of the game, which I hear all the time by Keith Jackson, who we just lost, but is the superstar of all superstars in calling games, it was we called it menu 2, and it was everybody flexed, tight end flexed, 3 wideouts, 1 back, Selvin Young, and the back was supposed to come underneath, and there was a slant on the backside to our tallest receiver, which was Lima Sweet at that time. David Thomas, our tight end, had caught passes. He was in the quick flat. But what we told Vince was, we're going to spread them out. You look quick. And unless you see it, your best asset's your legs. You take off and run. And then the backside end drops off with the back who runs the under route. And there's a loss of contain there. A great block by Justin Blaylock, our All-American tackle. And Vince just glides into the end zone. And then, Yogi, this is something for coaches that are listening. Then I was so proud of our team that we had to go for 2 because you guys had great skill, great confidence, and a long field goal would win the game if we don't score because we're up by 1. And Vince Young holds the ball, hands it to the official. 2 offensive linemen come over. We already had a 2-point play called. They get in the huddle. It's quarterback draw to the left behind Selvin Young. It's not a great call. You've got an extra guy over there, but we've got momentum at this time, and Vince is 235 pounds, and he bowls himself in the end zone. And then people said, "But you showed no emotion." I knew we had to kick it off to Reggie Bush. There's 19 seconds left, and Matt Leinert's one of the best quarterbacks ever. I think, Yogi, and you were the quarterback guy, I think Matt hit 16 of 17 the second half. Yeah, it was unbelievable. He didn't miss anything, and we knew that. But we knew the game wasn't over, and that's why all of the preparation you do every minute of every day in practice has to be game-like, because when you come down to the final minutes of a tight game like that, you have to just respond. You can't think.
Wow. So, Coach, you're now going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame, and congratulations on that. Thinking of a 13-year-old told by his family to be a doctor and a lawyer, and you get the greatest advice maybe in your life from another family member saying, "Hey, go do this profession, you'll love it." I'm curious with all the sacrifice that goes in, because there is a ton that, everybody knows about the family part of it just because maybe it's written about, but you got to live it to feel it. And you lived it for over 40 years. Are there any elements that you regret around just the demands of the craft, or things that you just wish other coaches didn't have to go through when you look back on your coaching career?
It's another great question, Yogi, because you've lived this. I remember when they paid me $5-something million for the first time in my life. My first thought was, doesn't matter. I don't have any time to spend it, because you're spending every minute of every day coaching year round, and it's worse now than it was even in probably 05, 6, 7, whenever they paid me that money. And you do feel like, but it's worth it for your family. They can use it. The rate you're working, you're probably going to die early, so they'll at least be taken care of. But the things that I remember that I regret, there's some individual player situations or maybe coaching situations that I could handle differently when I was young, that now I see that I didn't see then. And I've actually apologized to some people for the way I responded. It wasn't awful, but I didn't handle it as well as I could have. We lost a player in 2001 to a car accident coming back from spring training. When I see teams lose a player, I always try to help, because I feel like that's one that changes your life, because you take a responsibility. And even though this was a car wreck, I still felt responsible. And how do you handle it with all these other players and teammates? And I got up one morning and we were having a memorial service for the young man named Cole Pittman 17 years ago. Just the other day, we had a memorial for him 17 years ago, I think 2 days ago. And it's just stuff you remember for the rest of your life. And I got up that morning and said, Sally, I don't, it's a bad day to be the head football coach at Texas. I don't want to go to this memorial. She said, no, it's a good day to be the head coach at the University of Texas, because it's your responsibility to go try to put some sense into this thing with these young people. So that's your job. Go do it. So I think those type things more than anything else. It's not a call. It's not it's not something you didn't do on the field. I mean, you did what you thought was the best to do at that time on the field. So I think it's more stuff with individual people that maybe change the direction of their lives that you could have done better.
Yeah. Coach, if you were to end the sentence, how would you do it? The sentence would be, it all comes down to what for you?
It all comes down to making sure you did everything right. You know the difference in right and wrong. And what I did is, regardless of whether people liked it or not, regardless of whether they were mad at me and there were rumors that I should have done this, should have done that, I always did what I knew was the right thing to do. And I can sleep very well today because of that.
I love that. And the ethos of this podcast is to seek and uncover the humanity in sports around the world. So before we let you go, I'd love to ask you, what are you seeking right now in your life?
You know, I still feel like I'm coaching, Yogi. My job on TV, whether I'm calling a game or whether I'm in the studio or even on Sports Center, is try to take fans and coaches and players someplace that they can't go without me, or they can't go without a coach. Take them behind the scenes and let them understand what the coach was thinking, or let them understand how hard it is to win, or what happens in this situation. That's one thing. And the second thing is, I've still got a lot of energy and a lot of passion. And if the right job came up, I'd go back and coach again. And that's, I don't chase it. I don't have somebody looking for it for me, but if it's out there and it's right and where Sally wanted to live, and I felt like I could make an impact again. Coach Vermeil waited 17 years before he went back. I've been out 5. So I'm not giving up on the fact that, if the right circumstances came up, I might look at it again.
I love that. And we ask everybody, Coach, before we let them go, how do they feel about the word limits? Curious your thoughts on that word.
I think the only limits that you have are what you hold yourself to. I'm a dreamer. I'm a believer, and I don't think there's limits on anything. As long as you do it right, go for it. And you can surprise yourself with what you can accomplish. When we won the national championship, I asked Coach Royal, "What does this mean, Coach?" He said, "Oh, Coach, it's something very few people get to do, so it's kind of cool." He said, "Just put a check mark next to the little national championship, but you're going to want to do it again. So go back to work." And he said, "It's much harder time to do that first time."
Wow. Well, Coach, I hope you go coach again, and I hope I get to call a couple of your games. I've admired you and looked up to you for a long time, and I remember meeting you on that day like it was yesterday on the Rose Bowl, just kind of being the guy behind Coach Carroll, and the way you've always carried yourself is something I've always looked up to. So thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Yogi. I'm very honored that you had me on, and good luck and continued success for you.
Thank you, sir. Talk to you soon. How about that, Coach Brown? That was really impactful. I mean, there was a lot of takeaways for me. Of course, when he talks about being in 1 minute mode and bringing them all against SC. Talking to his defensive coordinator Gene Chizik at the time, and that final play. Of course, that's going to light you up just because I was a part of that game, a small part, but to be a part of it. But then you really dive into him and his story, and Coach Brown is a legend. Obviously it's why he's going into the Hall of Fame, but I love his resiliency, his bounce back. He's 1-10 at Tulane his first year, 2-20 in North Carolina his first 2 years, as he referenced. Just leaning in and being so specific around which job that he wanted. And then when he got it at Texas, how he handled it and how he embraced it and how he says he turned pressure into pride. And you think about it, a guy who was making $38,500 as the head coach at App State to one of the first $5 million coaches. He's seen everything in between. And what a great storyteller, what a great view on life. And I think for all of us who love this game and the humanity within it, and just overall love, being around championship people and learning from and applying to our life, I think this is a podcast that hopefully everybody leans into. So I highly recommend you follow Coach Brown on Twitter. He's a great follow at ESPN_Coach Mack. He gives out inspirational quotes and thoughts, and I'm going to be going back to this podcast a lot, just pulling out different little tidbits to apply to my life and hopefully share with you guys. Remember, you can stay in touch with me on all forms of social media at Yogi Roth, and make sure you go to yogiroth.com, subscribe to the How Great Is Ball newsletter. I love this season of podcast guests. Coach Brown, much appreciate your time. Congratulations on the Hall of Fame induction, which is upcoming. And I think, like Coach Brown said to all of us, limits are things that we always can overcome, and we do kind of set them ourselves. So he kind of took the tagline away from the podcast, and it's much better said by him than said by me. So I'm getting out of here. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you guys today. Make sure you subscribe, share, and review. And we'll be back with more of the Yogi Roth Show, the Life Without Limits podcast. Talk to you soon. Peace.